And now for something completely different.
Forget everything you've been told by others before. Get ready for the real deal, the full story. Real talk about money, markets, life. Now, it's The Real Investment Show with Lance Roberts, presented by RIA Advisors.
Welcome to The Real Investment Show. Today we are interviewing a very dear friend of mine who I've known for, nearly 25 years, maybe even a little bit longer than that. Tom Zizka, who is a reporter here at Fox 26 in Houston. We've done a lot of work together over the years and spent a lot of time talking about topics ranging from politics to economics to finance. And I thought it'd be a really good opportunity for us to kind of just get together today and kind of just talk about some of the top stories from 2025 that have not only affected markets, but the national political landscape, the economic landscape, etc. Tom, how you doing, my friend?
I am well, and you?
I'm doing fantastic.
Excellent. And I would, if I had to guess, I'd say roughly 25 years.
Yeah,
I remember when it was.
Yeah,
It was a party at Greg Grugan's house.
that is correct.
We were celebrating his son's, I believe it was probably his first birthday.
They just adopted.
Yes.
And that's right.
And
that's
we were
when met.
much younger men then.
We were much younger men back then, for sure.
And boy, I've worn a bunch of hats. So I was an investigative reporter, morning anchor. So now I wear the business reporter hat. So usually, this is funny. I'm usually calling you, asking for your input. So this is funny when you call me asking for my input.
Well, it's not really.
Try not to screw this up.
No, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. And this really isn't kind of an input thing. I just thought we could have a kind of just talk about some of the stuff because I talk about markets every day. It's markets and stuff like that. But there's been a lot of other stuff this year. It's been an interesting year. With the election of President Trump back in November of 2024, he took office earlier this year, promised lots of changes. Obviously, we've seen quite a few things that have impacted markets, from tariffs to other things. So I just thought we could just talk about some of the more interesting stories you covered this year and just kind of talk about those.
Have at it.
Yeah. So let's just talk a little bit about, though, like you said, you've done a lot. You've done investigative reporter, you've done business reporter, you've done anchoring. Let's talk about the media for just a second, because it might be a sensitive subject. But it's changed a lot.
Oh my gosh.
And it seems like it's changed a lot just really in the last probably 8 years, maybe.
So I've been doing TV news for 38 years.
Right.
It's the only thing I've done out of college. One of these days I'm going to get a real job and do something for real. But it is a vastly different creature from when I started.
Right.
And what isn't really? What job isn't different? There's an evolution there, and there's a necessity to that. And you are right that in the last handful of years, we're going through another evolution, and what we call linear TV, over-the-air TV, the kind of stuff you would get an antenna for. There are people who still get an antenna signal, but not many, and they're fewer and fewer, or cable for that matter. Right. Now we're streaming. And there was this time where we would do stories about, well, is this for you, this streaming idea? Well, we've crossed that line where there are now vastly more people streaming their content, whether it's TV or Netflix or Prime or fill in the blank.
Right.
And we're desperately, and I don't use that word lightly, desperately trying to collect some of those eyeballs.
Right.
Because that's where they are. They're on their mobile devices. It's just not streaming on their TV. They're on their phone and everything else. So we're trying to find some sort of way to get their attention in that small screen format, in a way that interests them, because the old way of telling stories is different.
Right.
The old way of telling stories does not work as well for that format, and then trying to find a way to monetize it.
Right.
Because it's got to pay the bills.
Well, it's got to, it's a business at the end of the day. But maybe, like for me, I used to do political talk. 2007, 2008.
We've had you doing that before.
Yeah, and for me, what I noticed, particularly when I was doing political talk on radio, what I noticed is that there was a change in mentality. You could have, during the Obama administration, for instance, we could talk about the Affordable Care Act, and we could disagree or agree on whether or not the Affordable Care Act was a good piece of legislation, what it was going to do. And you could have a reasonable conversation with just about anybody, right? And you would have a conversation that says, I disagree with you, and here's my reasons why I disagree with you. It's good for my family, whatever it is. But after the Obama, and really the first election when President Trump was elected the first time, it became much more vitriolic, where you could no longer have just a quote unquote civil conversation. Everything just became argumentative. And it seemed to me like there was a much bigger, and because maybe it's social media, where people can just get behind the screen and just say anything they want without any. You say stuff on screen that you would never say to somebody's face because they'd punch you in the nose, right?
So true.
so
true.
But that seems to be one of the bigger changes to where we've lost the ability. So news. I remember news growing up, right, where you'd sit up till 10 o'clock at night, if your parents would let you. And you'd watch Dan Rather or whoever, do the news. And it was the news. And they reported the stories. It was fact-based. It was, this is what's going on. And you kind of took it as gospel. It was like, that's the news. That's right. If Dan Rather says it, damn it, it's got to be right. And, nowadays it just has changed to a degree to where, people are not trusting of the stuff they hear in the mainstream media. Is that something that you think will eventually change back? I mean, are we making some efforts to move back in that direction?
No. Short answer, no. So,
is that because we're just trying to monetize the media?
No. I think there are a lot of things involved there. It's funny you mentioned Dan Rather and those names. I'm just about finished reading a book that my mom gave me in 1996.
Okay.
And I've never read it before. It's an autobiography of Walter Cronkite.
Yes.
Because I was in the news. My mom was still alive, and he wrote this book. She thought I ought to have it, and I said thank you, and I put it on my shelf, and I never read it. So I finally am reading it, and I read it now through the prism of looking back, and oh my, how quaint.
Walter Cronkite.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we're all. The three of us in this room, we're all old enough to remember Uncle Walter on TV.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Paul Berlin.
All of these things.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah.
And
people are going, who the hell are these people talking about?
And quick little tangent.
Google Walter Cronkite.
Go ahead, Walter Cronkite. Real quickly, in this book, it's really fascinating. I didn't realize how much time he spent living and growing up in Houston.
Right.
So in this book, he talks about these things that he did in old Houston in the 30s, and I know where that is, and where he went to school and that sort of thing. It's nice, but bring it up to today. The advent of being able to say anything anywhere and not be face to face. It started with President Bush, and then President Obama. And then, steamroll.
Well, but a lot of that's a function of the, we say, it started with, President Bush. It started with Obama.
Yes, and it just keeps gaining speed.
Right. But the change in that, what led to that change was this advent of the small screen and social media. Facebook went public in 2010. And, we saw, the Apple iPhone hit the markets in 2007. And since then, we've seen this rise of social media. And I guess this is the real point, which is ever since the advent of social media, news has gotten worse.
Well, true. And part of that is because this battle that I mentioned before, that we're trying to gather attention and catch attention, because research shows that the vast majority of people, especially young people, who don't watch traditional news, are getting their news in little bits and pieces from influencers,
right,
who are not traditional journalists, but pick a topic that's in the news and they sit there and they opine on whatever little podcast or 2-minute deal on TikTok or Instagram, and they make it sound like they're authoritative, and they may not know anything about what they're talking about.
Like these financial guys
But-
that have these radio shows. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you say it with enough conviction, somebody's going to say,
times.
and enough times, somebody's going to say, "I saw it. It must be true." And then
Absolutely.
they'll repeat it, and that's news. So that's what we're combating.
Right.
And do I think it's going to get better? No, I don't.
Well, I think between that and to get to really get a good set of views on your TikTok, you need to have a cat involved somewhere. So have a pet cat or a dog
to get a TikTok.
So-
Refuse.
I'm not sure it's making anybody smarter either. So.
I'm fairly certain.
Well, let's just. But I guess this is kind of the question. So let's talk about some of the kind of the top stories that you dealt with this year. Let's start with Houston. We have a lot of listeners here in Houston because we've been here forever. We have a lot of viewers. We have viewers all over the world now that watch us from Japan.
Hello, world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the great thing about YouTube is it goes everywhere. But let's talk about some of the stories here in Houston, since that's what you cover. I mean, what were some of the big stories that you really kind of dealt with this year?
So most of my stories are financially oriented stories and business
Which
oriented
is why you're on a
stories.
financial talk show.
Exactly. So,
But I mean, we know if it bleeds, it leads. So a murder story would be really good if you had one.
And I hate a murder story. I hate the bleeds, it leads. But here's something I will bring up that people desperately tried to make it a thing that I desperately fought against. There is, and if you ask me for the numbers, I can't tell you.
Right.
But there is a long list dating back into last year and before of people who have been found dead in Houston area bayous
Right.
for a variety of reasons.
Right. And just for a little background, real quick. So if you live in Houston, we have... Or
You know
if
what bayous are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
If you live in Houston, you know what the bayous are. But if you don't, we have these rather large rivers that we call bayous.
They're rivers, they're drainage ditches.
Ditches.
Houston is pan flat.
Exactly.
And so these things are designed to
Move water.
to drain the water away and move it into the Gulf of Mexico and
Right.
yeah.
Apparently along with the bodies.
And yeah, so a goodly number of bodies have been found in these bayous for a variety of reasons. People have committed suicide, homeless people, unhoused people.
Right.
Use whatever terminology you want to use these days. And some of them have been unexplained, and people desperately wanted to turn it into a story about a serial killer.
Yes. And it was such a good story.
And
They're going to make a movie of this.
And-
the Bayou River serial killer.
and there was one of my colleagues, and I won't say whom, who tried to use the term the Bayou Butcher.
Nice.
Yeah, and police. And I'm sitting in editorial meetings, and they're all right. What are we going to do about the Bayou story? It's, based on what?
Yeah.
And they just try to spin it into that. And if you don't have somebody of some authority who can say, this is suspicious, these are all linked, then you can't say that they are.
Right.
But
again, it makes a really good headline. I'll tell you what, I've been a serial killer for years. I mean, give me a box of Cheerios, I'd knock that thing out.
oh, man. Oh, God. Goodness. What is your favorite cereal?
Well, there's a difference. What's my favorite cereal? Right. So there's the cereals I can have,
Oh,
and then
goodness,
there's cereals I can't have.
Right.
So favorite cereal, if I could just have anything, probably Captain Crunch.
Yes.
Probably Captain
Absolutely.
Crunch. Yeah.
Bar none.
Yeah. The cereals I can have.
You know why Captain Crunch? Because you eat it forever because you got to pick it out of your teeth.
Exactly. It turns into peanut butter. So, but on the other side of that, the cereals I can't have, Raisin Bran Crunch, Cheerios.
Yeah.
Those are the ones we're stuck with.
Those are
particularly at our age, right? Where, by the way, happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Just turned a ripe old age of 39 again.
Thank you.
Yes.
I look good for 39.
Yeah, you and me both.
Yeah.
39 and killing it. So, but yeah, I think that it's an interesting story because that's been going around for a while. But flipping this back over towards kind of what you cover on the business side.
Right.
Going back to the beginning of the year, President Trump first gets elected in November, or
Right.
sorry, gets reelected in November. Lots of teeth gnashing about what this means. I got lots of phone calls.
Sure.
Like, what does this mean for the markets, for the economy? What were some of the early stories that you thought were the most interesting about that?
Where President Trump was concerned?
Yeah. Because, he's obviously done a lot this year.
Well, I think here in Houston, the energy capital of the world, one of his huge storylines as he was campaigning, and certainly since he has been in office, has been this suggestion that he would and has brought down oil prices, gasoline prices, that gasoline prices are more affordable now somehow because of him.
Right.
No.
Right.
That's not how it works.
Of course not.
Are they cheaper?
Yes.
Did I see $2.19 a gallon out in Katy as I was driving in here?
Yeah.
Yes, I did. Is that President Trump's doing?
No.
No.
Of course not.
No. That's a supply and demand, and guess what? There's too much supply and not enough demand right now.
Oh, I know. And look, and this is a great point, right? Because every president, and look, this isn't a Trump thing, right? Every president has done this throughout history. Is that the market goes up, it's like, I did that. You didn't do that. Markets did that. There was a supply demand in the economy, whatever. It's just like, for instance, just recently, there's been a lot of, again, the kind of the Democratic left has been trying to find anything they can push to kind of undermine President Trump's presidency right now. So they've been talking about the rise in beef prices. What they ignore is that there was a massive surge in beef prices under Biden, and it's gone up a little bit under President Trump. But again, that's just the narrative, right? And this is why it's always important. And like when we're doing our podcast and talking about the markets, whatever it is, we always want to make sure and say, look, these are the facts. Here's the chart. Here's the data. Because again, news, whatever it is, it should be fact-based. But there's a lot of this that just gets spun on either emotions or trying to prove a point or a narrative, whatever it is. But oil prices is a really good example because, again, yes, he says a lot of stuff, right? He's like, yeah, I did this. But yeah, it's a supply demand. And I'm actually writing an article that I'll be posting probably in the next day or so talking about oil prices going into 2026. Oil prices are likely to go lower next year.
Oh, yeah. Close to $50 a barrel.
Yes, if not, maybe even the 40s.
Yeah.
Which is not great for Houston, by the way.
In that general area. Yeah. Because what the president and the administration can be credited with, I believe, is streamlining or getting rid of requirements and restrictions that may stand in the way of wanting to drill.
Right.
But just a week ago, I did this very story and spoke with a driller, a producer, and he said, yeah, it's easier, but we're not,
right?
Because OPEC's putting a bunch of stuff out there, and there's a lot of oil floating on the ocean right now, and there's no need for us. In fact, rig count is coming down right now, and so we're not poking new holes in the ground.
Well, again, that's a function of, and it's an interesting thing, right? Is remember when Trump got first elected, he's like, we're gonna drill, baby, drill.
Exactly.
And I was here on the show saying, that's great. I'm glad you're going to drill, baby, drill. That's awesome. It's going to drive oil prices significantly lower because, and then you get to the problem of nobody wants to drill because oil's now non-profitable to drill. Yeah. And to go poke a hole, it's different to go drill a traditional well than it is to go drill an offshore well or to do,
of course,
or to do fracking. And those are significantly more expensive. So you need higher oil prices to justify those.
They need it about $50 to $60 a barrel to be profitable.
Right.
To break even. So if it
to
goes
break even,
to
right?
break even,
they're not making making money here. They're just breaking
now
even.
there are some, and this guy was telling me that there are some operations where they could streamline it even better than that, but that's typically.
Yeah.
So if it goes into that 40s, they're losing money.
Right.
And there was that brief period in the midst of COVID where oil went negative.
Yeah.
One day.
Exactly.
It went negative.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm going to pay you to take the oil away from me.
Right.
Briefly.
Very briefly in the options market.
Exactly.
And that happens.
Yeah. So there is that. You mentioned beef.
Yep.
Texas is the largest beef producing state by volume in the country.
And we also produce the largest amount of manure.
True. No stuff.
Oh, you can say it. We're on YouTube. We have the most bullshit of any state in the country. Especially in Austin. There's a lot of it in Austin, trust me.
Yeah. And that's just that. I spoke to some cattle growers. Mm-hmm. Fascinating down in El Campo. I went to a cattle auction. That was just fascinating to see. And up close and personal, cows are mean.
Yeah.
It's like they know exactly why they're there. Yeah. And they're none too happy about why they are there.
He's like, well, when you're growing up in Texas, there's a thing called cow tipping. Yeah. And if you don't know this, right? So cows sleep standing up. And so one of the things we would do growing up is sneak out into cow pastures and push the cows over. And then you have to run like hell because they will chase you. So yes, to your point, they are mean.
They're mean. But there aren't enough cows, and our appetite is insatiable for beef protein. Yeah. And
love me a good steak.
Right, and it takes a couple of years to grow a calf into a production size cow. So
right.
It's going to take a couple of years before beef prices can become reasonable again.
Right. And we just got to, and again, we have to do the same thing with oil. We've got to produce a lot more cows. Then we got to get the supply up and to offset the demand. One of the other things that, he did initially coming in, which was probably, I would have to say, the most controversial, is on the immigration front. Mm-hmm. And, what were some of the kind of the stories that y'all dealt with around kind of the initial changes to immigration and then since what's happened?
Well, I think with this latest administration coming in, their method of doing it was what people are concentrating on.
Right.
Because if you look at the sheer numbers, other administrations have deported vastly more people at a pace than this one has.
Right. A lot of people don't realize that Obama was the king of deportations. He deported like 3 or 4 million people.
But it's the method by which they're doing it.
Of course.
And pictures matter. Mm-hmm. And
narrative matters.
And the narrative matters. And the fact is that there are a bunch of people that do not care for this president. Mm-hmm. And circling back to, and there were a bunch of people who didn't care for President Obama either.
Absolutely.
But you circle back to the social media environment and the hyperbolic nature of all of our discourse, then the way this story gets covered today is much different than the way it gets covered when President Obama was in charge.
Right.
On top of that, we did not see masked ICE agents descending on workplaces and wrestling people, and we didn't see protesters getting in their face with their phones and screaming at them. So it was a vastly different sort of dynamic.
Right.
But numbers wise, it's no different than what has happened for a good long while.
Right. But again, it's narrative. It's what you see in the sound bites and the clips and those type of things, like you said, on social media.
And I think a lot of people right now think it is much, much worse.
Yeah, and it's really not. But it does have an impact on the economy, right?
Yes.
This is, there's a lot of debate about this. Look, we live in Texas, where we have a lot of farms and ranches and things like that, where immigrant labor is needed. Right? They work cheaper, they work longer, they're more efficient. That is what it is, right? It's, I can't, I'm not going to be able to convince my son to grow up and go go work on a ranch or those type of things, right? It's just
right or wrong, it has developed this way. And I think it's probably wrong.
It probably is wrong.
Yes.
Because we raised our children saying you have to go to college, you've got to get a degree. You going to work on a ranch, are you crazy? You're going to go raise cattle. What kind of life is that for you? Or you're going to go work on a farm and raise wheat. What kind of life is it? But there was a whole generation.
I want to circle back to the farm thing in a moment.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that there's been a whole generation of parents that have come up telling their kids, and look, I am part of that generation. You've got to go to college, get a degree to do this, and so what that created was a gap in needed labor that had to be filled by somebody, and immigrants were more than happy to fill that role. And right, wrong, or indifferent, it's just the way it is. It's the way it's developed. Mm-hmm. But now we're potentially causing an economic problem because, again, that is a needed labor supply. Mm-hmm. H-1B visas are, becoming harder to come by. We need high technology. So there is the deportation of illegal immigrants is what the Trump administration is focusing on. But at the same time, we need immigration to support an economy. We're producing the least number of children demographically in the United States. We're producing the least number of children since 1940. The average fertility rate of females right now is less than 2. So in other words, women are having less than 2 children, and they're having it later in life, which that's affecting the demographic curve. And again, we need more bodies in the economy to produce economic growth. They need to work, produce, create a job, create labor, those type of things. And so we desperately need immigration, and that's been one of the big stories. But the other side of that story that really hasn't. Everybody's kind of focused on the deportation side of it, but nobody's talking about the immigration side of it, which is what we need.
Well, the two get conflated.
Correct.
And inappropriately so. The whole the topic of immigration wraps up the undocumented, illegal, call it whatever you want, part. And legal immigration from all over the world is something that we absolutely need more of. But getting control of the undocumented part from all over the world is also something we need to do. And that's the part that kind of gets all wrapped up, and we hear all sorts of voices saying we need to let this happen. Well, no, we don't need to let illegal immigration happen. We don't need to, I don't think, typically, bend over backwards to let lawbreakers have their way. Right. Let them follow the law, I think is a reasonable way.
No, I think most reasonable people will say, as long as you're following the law, great, you're welcome here, right? Come in. America's the greatest place in the world. Come enjoy the fruits of your labor, because that's what capitalism gives you. It's the other side of that coin that gets kind of misconstrued. And we've heard the stories, we've seen the stories of what happens, and we're seeing the effects of this immigration, this kind of mass immigration, this mass unchecked immigration into countries like Germany, England, France. They're starting to see the negative side of uncontrolled, unchecked immigration on their own economies. And that's the one thing that we need to be careful of, is that in order to create an economic balance and create stronger economic growth and better economic prosperity, we need immigration, like we talked about, because we need those jobs to be created. We need those jobs to be filled. But we also need the economic production, which creates better economic prosperity for everybody in the economy. It's a supply-demand game, just like everything else is.
I also wonder how much some of our perception of those dynamics across the pond are influenced by maybe our narrow view of what we're seeing, because what we're seeing is via social media as well. We're looking at somebody's narrow interpretation versus. Who knows?
Yeah, no. Well, I have a lot of contacts in the UK, as an example. Right. My son lives in the UK also.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So he went to the UK, became a mechanical engineer, and he's working for a country over there, for a company. But no, we have this conversation a lot, and the problems of uncontrolled kind of immigration and changes to political policy. Has changed the kind of the face of the economy over the last few years. But speaking of face of the economy, one of the big moves this year for the Trump administration has been the Big Beautiful Bill.
Yep.
Which got passed. Anything of noteworthy in that you've covered? Because you've asked me you've interviewed me on the Big Beautiful Bill specifically.
There are. I don't think there's anybody in the middle. There are people who think it is big and beautiful, and there are people who think it is big and ugly.
Yeah, exactly.
It all comes down to your perception over what it does or doesn't do. And I think people are probably still
they're still very divided now.
And I think they're still finding out what's in it, a la the Affordable Care Act, when you got to vote for it so we can find out what's in it. Exactly. This thing was 1,000+ pages as well, and
we've got to stop that.
We've got to.
Yeah.
So I can't know one thing.
Well, you and I are going to be talking about this next year because the Big Beautiful Bill, it starts in January. So a lot of these things that were passed inside the Big Beautiful Bill in terms of tax cuts, tax reforms, those type of things, those all take effect in January.
Yeah.
So we'll be seeing what the impacts are.
One thing that did come up in the story is the farm aid package that the president announced. I lose track of that. We'll call that a couple weeks ago. It was a $12 billion package, $11 billion in direct aid to farmers, row crop farmers, designed as bridge payments, not loans, but bridge payments before a safety net package from the Big Beautiful Bill goes into effect in October of next year. Right. And the farmers want that.
Oh yeah, they do.
Farmers say they need that. Their input costs are out of control. Have been for years.
Right. Yeah. By the way, the problems with farmers is not a new thing. This has been going on for a long time.
Oh yeah.
And part of this is because we provide subsidies, farm subsidies that go primarily to the mega farms. And it really is a disadvantage. If you're a small farmer or a small producer, you're at a big disadvantage to the Archer Daniel Midlands of the world, those type of things. And my argument has been for a long time that we need to either stop subsidies entirely or only subsidize farms of a certain size or lower.
And there are a bunch of those small farmers just outside Houston.
Yes.
You go 35, 40 miles outside downtown Houston, Fort Bend County, Needville area, and you can go down into Galveston County as well. Yeah. There are lots of small family farms. Yep. There's one guy whom I've spent a fair amount of time with over the last handful of years. He's been farming the same area for 45 years. He was born a half mile from his farm.
Wow.
And they need this stuff.
Yep.
The cost of fuel, the cost of fertilizer, the cost of seed, the cost of equipment, the cost of insurance, and every year is feast or famine. And then on top of that, the tariffs.
Yep. That hurt
for cotton, for corn. We don't grow soybean here, but cotton, corn, and sorghum.
Right. But just like the cost of their equipment, we import a lot of that.
Yeah.
From China, and we import a lot of the other things that go into the farming process from other countries, and those all got impacted by tariffs.
And we need those people,
and that's why your food costs have gone up.
But we need those people,
absolutely.
And this is a culture and a community and a people that most in urban Houston have no idea even exist there, but you would be lost without them.
Yep. Yeah, and if you ever just take a drive, and really what state you're in doesn't matter. If you drive outside of your city, you're going to start seeing these little farms, and because they're virtually all over the country.
Right.
Again, we have lots of ranches, we have lots of farms in Texas, just because Texas is so damn big.
Oh my goodness!
But it's pretty much in every state, and you don't realize that this is a critical aspect to the overall functioning of the U.S. economy, is the importance of these people, and they have been working. We talk about our heroes, right? We don't idolize our farmers and ranchers near enough, because they are so important to putting food on your table. You think food costs are bad now. You start losing farms and ranches to a large degree because they simply can't afford to stay in business. You've got a real problem.
Mm-hmm. Farmers and truckers.
Yep.
We wouldn't exist without them.
Speaking of truck, have you done any work on what's going on with trucking as of late? Because if you take a look at trucking, like freight indexes, those type of things, they pretty much suggest the economy's in the tank.
Not recently, I have not.
Interesting. Because again, if you talk to truckers, remember we went through that spate a while back. It was during the Biden administration, right after the economic shutdown. Mm-hmm. Couldn't get enough truckers.
Yeah,
we were hiring everybody.
Yes,
right. You didn't even have to know how to drive a truck. If you could just see, they would put you in a truck to drive, because we were so shorthanded, and truckers were getting paid six figures to drive.
Yes.
Lately, though, just been watching a lot of these freight indexes. They're just completely falling off the cliff. And normally, freight indexes are a really good indicator of economic activity. Which makes sense, right? I mean, if you're hauling more freight, it's because you've got more demand in the economy for products, goods, or services, because you're having to haul it in a truck to get it somewhere. But the product loads themselves have dropped very sharply. I just didn't know if you.
How much do you think that is perhaps a latent effect of a combination of tariffs or economic uncertainty?
Well, no, I think that's exactly what it's telling you. I think it's telling you that the economic activity that we saw in 2021, 2022 in particular, we had these really good, strong years of economic growth.
Yes.
3%, 4%, 5% economic growth rates. That was all a function of that massive chunk of checks to households, stimulus payments, everything else we did, that just drug forward this massive amount of demand. Because if I've got money today that I didn't have, right, or you give me money today, I'm going to buy stuff that I wanted that maybe I wouldn't have bought for a year or two until I saved up for it. But I was able to buy it now and pull that demand forward. And so I think what we're seeing now, and we're going to see that, and we're seeing this in the inflation data. As you and I are sitting here recording this, we just got the latest inflation report out this morning, which showed a pretty sharp drop in inflation the last 2 months. The Federal Reserve just had their meeting talking about employment was actually negative 20,000 jobs in October, had a positive 40,000 job growth in November, but net that out, that's 20,000 jobs over 2 months. That's not robust economic activity. So it suggests that what these freight kind of indexes are suggesting is that the economy is actually slowing down and weakening probably a bit more than some of the headlines suggest. He pauses.
Yeah, and we have talked so many times about just trailing indicators.
Yeah,
and you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Until it rears its ugly head, and that's what that meant.
Yeah, exactly. Well, again, this is always the problem, right? Is that people go, well, what do you expect for next year? It's like nobody knows. We can all
pull out the
magic 8 ball.
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly. Yeah, but that's look. It's all a guessing game, right? But some of the data certainly suggests that the economy is slowing down. The Fed's cutting rates, and people are going, why are you cutting rates? Markets are all-time highs. Everything's great. Why are you cutting rates here? Because I think the economic data is suggesting there's a bit more weakness than some of the trailing economic data is suggesting, and we're now starting to play a little bit of catch-up. Every single employment report this year has been revised lower, which is not that you don't see that in a robust economy.
And as much as the president on down, as people want to say, we're doing great,
right?
People don't feel great. The polls. The latest polls, as we have this conversation, show, 60-something%?
Yep.
People feel crummy.
Yep.
And people are not, wages are not keeping up. They're barely keeping up, if at all, with the cost of living increases. And
Yeah.
People are just generally.
Well, yeah. I mean, people are struggling to make ends meet.
Yes.
In a lot of cases. I mean, look, we talk about the wealth gap a lot on the Real Investment Show.
Yes.
Because, you've got 20% of the people that own roughly 80% of the wealth, and everybody else is just struggling to pay bills. Now, part of that is due to the fact that we had, a lot of monetary influences for the last 15 years. We were holding interest rates at zero. We were doing quantitative easing. I mean, we've done all kinds of things to bail out markets. We've done everything we can to keep recessions from happening. And people forget that recessions are actually a good thing because it resets the economy and gets rid of some of these excesses. But we've done everything we can to avoid them. But, you're seeing, I think, a lot when you look at those polls of, unhappiness, what do you feel about your job, those type of things, they're all pretty negative. And it's because it's like, man, it kind of sucks. I'm just I'm working my butt off and I'm not able to make ends meet because every time I go to the store, things are costing more. Every time I go to do something, it costs more. I was telling my wife the other day, it's like, so I was playing, so for I'm going to take my wife on a trip here over Christmas just to celebrate a little bit with the kids. And the cost of that trip, I was like, man, a couple $1,000s. Yeah, surprise. I mean, just and I was talking to my wife about this. It's like, I don't see how. Of course, you take a look at the stock value of Disney as an example. It's just kind of in the tank. Has a lot to do with their movie side of their production. But how do families afford to go to Disney? And pay, $100 for tickets plus your airfare plus your however you're getting there, driving, whatever. And then you're wondering why people aren't happy, right? And why people feel, downtrodden in the economy a bit.
Well, part of the problem is that people expect prices to go down.
Right.
People want prices to go down, and why haven't they gone down? We just saw them go up. Well, they're never going down.
Right. Prices never go down.
No.
We just hope they go up slower.
Exactly. If they go down, we have a different set of problems.
Exactly.
Which is a different conversation altogether.
No, I think it's a great conversation. I think this is something that a lot of people misunderstand, which is we want inflation. We just don't want runaway inflation. Right. We don't want inflation at 9%, but we want inflation at 2%. And this is really hard for people to understand is that if you don't have inflation, you don't have economic growth. You don't have your wages going up, your economic activities going up. So if you have, if you have no inflation, that's one thing. That's just a very slow economic environment and price levels aren't changing. So things are probably struggling. But if you have disinflation where prices are going down, that's called a recession. And that's where you're losing your job and things are getting really tough. So, it's important to understand that what we don't want, we want inflation? Yes. Then this is why the Fed targets 2%. We want 2% inflation. That's price stability. That's some economic growth. Everybody's happy. Everything's good. But you don't want 9% inflation.
No. And you don't want deflation.
Correct.
Exactly. The messaging that we're going to bring prices down was wrong. And then a lot of people out there who took that as absolute and then, well, why aren't prices coming down?
Right.
And I see reporting at a national level. Well, prices haven't come down and people are unhappy about that.
Right.
Well, you should know that prices aren't going to come down.
And there's also the psychological factor of this, which is that people become used, and corporations know this. This is not a surprise. What I'm about to say should be, everybody should know this. If you go to the gas station and pay $3 for a gallon of gas, and then oil prices come down a lot. Say we go back to where oil prices fall to 40. Gas prices will come down to $2.75. They're never going back to $2 a barrel because at $3 you were unhappy, but at $2.75 you're now happy because gas is cheaper. And oil companies know this. Food companies know that if eggs were $6 a dozen, they're now $4 a dozen. Even though they used to be $2 a dozen, you'll be happy at $4 and you'll pay $4. So this is how business works.
Well, absolutely. I mean, during COVID, we saw minutes from corporate minutes where they basically said, how high can we push these prices before the consumer gets really upset? How much can we get from them? And I'm paraphrasing, but that's
Sure.
basically the message. And they all had that conversation.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's a profit game.
Because, and they're not complete demons because business is in.
Yeah, they weren't the ones hoarding toilet paper. That was you. That was you guys during the pandemic hoarding toilet paper.
Says the guy who who found the empty shelves, right?
Exactly.
Where did it all go?
Remember the guy that used a Sears Sears catalog?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, back in the day. Anyway, so what was one of your bigger stories this year that you did that
Boy,
took off? Did you have a viral story this year? Since we're talking about social media.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Had nothing to do with business at all.
Okay, which is fine.
You know that I am an avid cyclist.
Yes. And so is your daughter.
My daughter, my youngest daughter, absolutely. My youngest daughter works for USA Cycling. Mm-hmm. It's the governing body of cycling in the United States. But in my mind, I'm an excellent cyclist. To look at me, I am not. But anyway.
So you're not Lance.
No,
Lance
I'm
Armstrong.
Not. I am not. Anyway, but I'm connected to the cycling community,
Yes.
and I like going to races. But there's this kid. 10 years ago, I saw him at a local race, and he was about 14 years old, and it was his first race, the summer races in Memorial Park, and damned if this 14-year-old kid didn't school all of the adults and just become this little phenom.
Right.
Anyway, fast forward, 24 years old, he's a national champion.
Wow.
And in a specific type of racing. And taking his Stars and Stripes jersey and on a national circuit of this particular type of racing, it's called Criterion racing, which is a closed circuit, a timed race, and
As fast as you can go.
as fast as you can go. It's very viewer friendly, spectator friendly, because you just keep going around and around and around. And it's not unlike NASCAR because there's some bumping and grinding going on as well.
Right.
Anyway, and he was just winning everything. And he's a showman. This little 14-year-old became this adult, and he's embracing it and just doing all sorts of things to get as many viewers as possible and spectators as possible. And so I know his dad, and tell me when Lucas is going to be home. I'd love to catch up with him and do a story. So I met him, and he's just the greatest kid. And did a story with him, and he's very social media savvy, and he put it on Instagram on his page, and it just went
Crazy.
And
Well, people like those stories.
pardon me?
People like those
They
stories.
do. I mean, it was just good.
Yeah.
I mean, there was nothing wrong with it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think people crave things that make you feel good because everything else makes you feel so bad all the time.
Isn't that the truth?
No matter what you turn around, there's you get on social media, there's somebody there that has nothing better to do but than just to troll you. They're just miserable people.
So true.
And so I think people are just aching for something good. You know, my wife and I spend a lot of time just sending videos back and forth to each other that are just that just to make each other laugh because, we're both working, 24/7 pretty much.
Yeah.
And so just to get something that just gets you out of that mindset of just grinding all the time is a good thing.
Oh, I do that. If my wife hears me in the other room and I'm laughing just out of the blue, she knows some Instagram reels are coming her way, and they're typically inappropriate.
Yeah, generally. That's kind of the way mine work too with my wife. But I'll like, honey, I've sent you 15 videos today, and like you haven't read them yet.
Oh, exactly.
You don't love. Apparently, you don't love me anymore.
So true.
So this is how we gauge our relationship, is whether or not you're reading the videos.
So I started sending some of those to my son-in-law.
Yes.
Because my youngest got married in April.
Congratulations.
And thank you.
I knew that. I'm just congratulating you.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
And so he's getting some of these now, and apparently he's looking at them and then turning to my daughter and saying, "What is up with your dad?"
Yeah. So I have a daughter that's probably about to get married, and she's the guy she's very involved with. He's a super nice guy. He's an electrician, but does not have the same sense of humor as the rest of the family. And either he doesn't have the same sense of humor as the rest of the family, or he's just not sure if the rest of the family is sane or not. So, which may be the latter, but.
Did you say he's an electrician?
Yeah, he's an electrician.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Did you interview Mike Rowe at one time or something?
I've never met Mike Rowe.
Okay.
I would love to.
Yeah. I thought you had done a story about him.
I have done trade-oriented stories.
Okay.
And I just love because we were talking about the pressure to send our kids to college, and I did the same thing with. I mean, my two girls never thought that they wouldn't go to college, and they did, and they graduated.
Right.
But
that's what we thought we were supposed to do.
yeah, exactly.
That's the way we were raised.
But college isn't for everybody, and we need the doers.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so I was talking to my potential son-in-law, and over the next 5 years, we're going to be short 500,000 electricians.
It's stunning.
And so my house got struck by lightning recently, and if you don't think there's a reason to be an electrician, my house got struck by lightning. I lost power in the front of the house, and I had to call an electrician out. Cost me $1,000 to get that fixed, right? And maybe 4 hours worth of work. So it's good money. We see, and this is the whole thing about the way we were raised, because when we were being raised, our parents were telling us, like, when you grow up, if you have a daughter, when you grow up, marry a doctor, a lawyer, or a stockbroker, right? That was what you wanted to have your daughter marry. And so got embedded in us, is that's what you're supposed to do, is move towards white collar work. And so we said, okay, you've got to go to college, you've got to do this. And we were actually taught to actually kind of look down on, you don't want to be a blue collar worker.
Oh, exactly.
That's not for you. There's a lot, plumbers, electricians, those are going to be hugely, because of these data center build outs that are coming. Plumbers, electricians, all the construction workers that are involved in building those data centers are going to be hugely in demand, which means better wages. And there's electricians that knock down
and they're already in demand, and that demand will be never ending, unceasing.
Yeah, and because at least for now, because we don't have the robots, you can't replace an electrician with AI. Now, eventually, when you can stick AI in a robot, maybe you can, but at least not right now.
Not for the foreseeable future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, our jobs. We're highly at risk of AI replacing. Tom Zizka will go back to looking 39 again because of AI.
Wow. Well, maybe there's some benefit to that.
It'll be all artificial intelligence, but
well, then there will be some intelligence involved. Finally.
Exactly. There you go.
Thank goodness.
All right, my friend. Anything else we missed today?
I think we've solved world peace.
I like that. So what frustrates you the most when you're doing your job?
You don't have enough time.
Is it the editorial control? What is it?
No, no, I'm not gonna. I am not going to.
I know. I'm not going to say talk bad about your company. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying when you're trying to put a story together, what frustrates you most of the time trying to get a story done?
I think just the ever growing list of things that are required to check off to get that story to put that story to bed, so to speak.
Right.
I mean,
because you've got to get your story approved by. I'm going to do this story,
but it's got to. I mean, there's over the air. There's linear expectations. There are digital expectations, and there's just so many different things that we have to do in the same amount of time. Do more with less.
Yeah. Well, that's been an interesting thing. I remember back in the day, y'all would call me as an example and say, hey, we want to come to your office and shoot a spot. And you would have 2 cameramen and you and microphones and everything else. And today you show up with an iPhone.
I do.
And where's your cameraman? He's not employed anymore.
No, we just send them off on their own and they do their own thing.
Yeah.
So
that's the same thing with our video. I mean, used to produce a radio show, it would take 5-6 people. Now you can do it with one person.
Yeah.
So technology at its finest. And people are saying, oh, AI won't replace jobs. Trust me, AI is coming for our job.
Any day now.
Exactly. All right, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed the conversation. Absolutely.
A lot of fun. This concludes the Real Investment interview series on the Real Investment Show. So if you liked it, please like and subscribe to our channel. It certainly helps us keep guests like Tom coming in. The more viewers we have, the better guests we get. And we had to start with Tom, so we had to start somewhere. But nonetheless, it does help us a lot. So like and subscribe to the channel. It does help us. And also get by the website, realinvestmentadvice.com. Send us your questions, comments, emails, people you want us to interview. Let us know. We'll try to get them on the air to interview them about whatever topic you'd like us to interview them about. Have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the next edition of The Real Investment Show.